I'm wearing a tie to distract the audience from my hair.
All of us have what can charitably be called as windswept hair.
I think only Dr. Swamy is the lucky one.
What's the option? No, that lucky, I don't think so. You would want to be right now. I think we are almost live. So let me just check if we are live.
I'm wearing a tie to distract the audience from my hair. Oh, there is a time lag.
No. There is no lag. It is the same thing I did yesterday. So now I'm finished it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There won't be any lag now. What I did is I kept the screen of YouTube on yesterday. Okay, so all the audiences, it looks like today is going to go off without a glitch. So the gods of technology are kind on me. And we'll have a very interesting conversation. All of you who follow on Twitter already know who's coming. But those who just see me on YouTube and not on Twitter, we have a very, very distinguished guest whom more than anybody of you, I want to hear. I want to deep dive into his concepts, which I've already tweeted, of secularism, of what is atheism, because he says he's an atheist. So how does he reconcile that, living in India especially, where this can be a very touchy topic? So all that I will discuss. But first thing, which is compulsory for anybody running a YouTube channel, please subscribe to the channel. If you're watching it for the first time, please share it with your friends. We started in lockdown, and I'm very happy to say that people are watching it for a very long period of time. And today I saw last 28 days, you watched it for 25 lakh minutes. So when I started off, I thought everybody said do a 10-minute clip. People have short attention spans. But I'm so happy that people are watching it for so long that it's touched 25 lakh minutes in just every 28-day period that comes. 25 lakh minutes has touched. So without further ado now, let me tell you about the guest. He is a scientist by profession, but a wordsmith by craft. You have to see how he frames the words. One would almost believe he was an arts or humanities student. And I don't know whether he will take that as a compliment or not, because he's a scientist. But, and he's an ace one. He went to St. Stephen's, and after that on scholarship, he did his BA first, then MA, then PhD from Cambridge. He's a full professor in JNU. We'll try to pardon him for that. And, if that wasn't enough, he's already written 3 novels. Interestingly, novels, not non-fiction. So if we get time, we will briefly talk about that also. You have already guessed who the person is. It is Anand Ranganathan. Thank you, Anand, for agreeing to do this and coming here. So I found something very interesting. You call yourself as an atheist. And in India, secularism is anyways a very big debate and concept. So what is firstly atheism to you? How do you define yourself as an atheist?
Right. So first of all, thanks very much, Ishkaran, for having me. It's a real pleasure. And there are 2 reasons why I'm here. One is obviously that I'm a big fan of your writings and your views, and increasingly I've been watching your YouTube channel. And secondly, being a free speech absolutist, I don't know when I'll be arrested. So it really pays to have a brilliant lawyer as a friend. So jail jaunga to Mysore Pak leke aa jana yaar bachane ke liye.
अरे anticipatory bail लेके आएंगे.
But to the question that you asked, I think according to me, atheism is that there is no God. Agnostics are the people who doubt the existence of God. And I think before Darwin, before Hubble, that's how I see it. You could be pardoned for saying that, you are agnostic because you could doubt the existence of God. And of course, in all the, major religions, their scriptures, it is believed that God created earth in 6 days, and God created heaven and earth, and, all the animals and everything. So now we know that at least I believe that there is no God. So that is what, for me, atheism means. And of course, through the rapid advent of molecular biology, right from the 1950s, you had the Miller experiment in 1953 that showed that you could actually, through through basic elements and reduced atmosphere in Earth, you could actually create the basic building blocks of life. And in fact, people have replicated that experiment even in oxidizing atmosphere, in neutral atmosphere, and they have found that indeed you can get the basic elements of life, i.e. nucleic acids, sometimes even amino acids. But it wasn't until people started sequencing human genomes and genomes of other animals and organisms that they found of this tremendous relationship that we have with all living beings, with the progenitor being, the single cell. So from bacteria to humans. So, and if you were to look at what biologists build, what is called the tree of life, which kind of slots in all the living beings on a, metaphorical tree, if you may call it. In the 1880s, the tree of life had man sitting on top. You can still see it. Right now, if you were to make that tree of life, man is just barely hanging on to one of the 6,000 branches of this tree of life. So science is very humbling. And science also tells you that you can be wrong, but you go by the prevailing, reproducible theories and experiments. And of course, I don't want to go into detail, but, a lot of, when people say, well, theory of evolution is a theory, well, no, it's an axiom now, because there are a lot of experiments that have proved it. Stemmer's sexual PCR experiment, then you have Zostak's protocell experiment. So, I truly believe that there is no God. I don't doubt the existence of God.
Obviously, I remember we were on this Ram Mandir case hearing day on Times Now, and yes. I tweeted a picture of yours and mine saying the atheist and the bhakt. So my views are well known, so but I will not get into discussion. I only asked atheism for a simple reason, to frame it.
Right.
We had secularism inserted in our constitution by the 42nd Amendment. And that secularism now has run a particular course till at least 2014. And even now, I would say it runs the same course, because the academia, and I won't get into trouble by discussing academia and JNU, but academia at large.
No, feel free. I'm on the other side of the Iron Curtain in JNU. They don't trouble scientists that much,
This secularism in India has had a Shah Bano judgment, where what the courts decide in the name of secularism, the government of that day overrode it. How do you see secularism? Or you have Sabarimala. But at the same time, I was there on this Earth Festival where you asked a very pertinent question, that there is a particular book which describes a dress code for women.
Yes.
So would a feminist object to that particular dress code of that particular religious book? So how do you see secularism in India? You think it's the right way, or do you think it's a perversion of secularism? What do you see in operation?
Right. So I would like to see India as a secular nation, but not the kind of secularism that we have. For me, secularism is absolute and total separation of church and state. So it's you can say it's a European definition, but according to me, there has to be a complete separation of religion and legislature or executive or judiciary, or you may call it, the pillars of democracy. And that is what, to me, is a secular state. Now, I've been saying this, that India, through the birth of its constitution itself, is actually not secular. It is plural by nature, because there are half a dozen articles and amendments in our constitution that do not make it secular. So, for example, you could have a right to, for example, practice your own religion. Now, if you have a right to practice your own religion, you also have a right to practice all the other tenets of that religion, which others may find offensive. And Shah Bano case was, just one example of it. There are hundreds of such examples. So the question is, where do you draw the line? So if the constitution says that you have a right to practice your religion, and in your religion, in fact, I will, of course, making sure that my head is satisfactorily attached to my torso, I'll be very careful. I would be quoting a few verses, if you know what I mean. But the fact of the matter is that there are directive principles, And both, they apply to both Hindus as well as Muslims, as well as Christians. So it's not that, when you say India is a secular country, we are completely towards, an appeasement kind of a thing. Yes, we are in many aspects, but they are not related to the constitution. For example, as you would know, Hindu temples are under the control of the government. The income of the Hindu temples is taxed, whereas the income of the mosques or the gurdwaras or the churches isn't taxed. And there are so many other things. So yes, people say that there is an SPGC or SGPC Act. There is Waqf Board, but they're different from the way Hindu Endowment Act works. And that was principally, of course, Jay Sai, another brilliant lawyer, would know much more about this, and he does. But the fact of the matter is, we really are not secular. We are a plural country. We have a plural constitution. And that is the way it works. So if you really want to be secular, you have to remove all tenets of religion from our directive principles, from our articles, from our clauses in the constitution. And I don't think I foresee a future where you would actually be able to do that. If at all, we would probably go the other way. That also has, I always bring in the kind of counterpoint to when people say they hate, Hindutva. So I say, can you tell me 5 things, tenets or diktats that are in Hindutva that aren't already there in Islam? And if you can't show me any difference, then would you be prepared to accept that you would also hate Islam as much as you hate Hindutva? So, when people say we want to become Hindu Rashtra, I think Hinduism, I personally again believe that there is a distinct difference. So in the case of Hinduism, I think the religion in Hinduism is an offshoot of the way of life. Whereas in Islam, way of life is the offshoot of the religion. So one aspect, which is Hinduism, one philosophy, is much more amenable to change, because way of lives can be changed. And correspondingly, the religion, which is an offshoot of a way of life, can also be changed. But in the other case, you cannot change anything. So you are prohibited to do so, because that is the calling of God. So when people say that Hindu Rashtra is going to be something which is going to be hell for a lot of other practitioners of people who practice other faiths, I would always, as I give this counterpoint, personally, I don't want religion to come into constitution and working of a republic at all. But if it does, then I have another question. For people who find nothing wrong in their religion, why do they find theocracy is wrong? So, for example, people say, many Muslims say, India is a wonderful country. It has a wonderful constitution. I don't like Iran. It is a theocracy. It is based on religion. But if you find there is nothing wrong in your religion, then what do you find objectionable in your nation running according to your religious tenets? Nobody is able to answer me that, because the moment they do, the moment they object, they are going to say that, yes, there are things that are wrong in my religion.
Anand, I think you have a very optimistic version on a very limited point, I'll say. When you say people do not say why they do not want India to be like Iran or Iraq or whatever school of religion they want to be, I think that is just posturing. Deep down, if they were to vote, and we have seen in voting, they will not probably mind it to be like Iran or Iraq. I think they know the numbers. They know that they cannot have an Iran. That is why I think, I'm not saying everybody, but majorities are 51%, right? Because there was this poll done by, I am not sure who did it, PW or some other, where they said how many people in Middle East countries supported blasphemy to be punishable by death. It was 75, 80%.
Yeah.
That's a stunning percentage. Or for free speech, for that matter. A lot of the audience may not know how how 295A came into being.
Yes.
Was a direct result of somebody publishing a book on a certain religious figure, calling it Rangila, and so there I do not know whether, but on Hindu Rashtra, I have a Do you see a
there, Ishkaran, if I can interject, you see, if you, I mean, people have, of course, posed this question. But I think people who, over a period of time, enjoy a lot of freedom and rights. I'm not saying India is as good as America. America certainly has much more freedom of speech and expression than India does, for a start. But people who tend to enjoy, over a large period of time, such freedoms, they may say that we want, let's say, Sharia compliant country. They may say it, but deep down they also know, the so-called quote unquote progressive hypocrites, as I call them, that once that law is applicable, like we saw what happened in Syria or in the Levant or so many other countries, then they would be the first ones running away from it. You see? So if they really want the Sharia law, they don't go to the countries that have theocracies. They don't go to the countries that have Sharia laws. They want to stay in countries that don't have Sharia laws. And because the love for, or the hypocrisy in them, because they're supporting something that they don't want to live in, is so strong that they still want to support it. So there is hypocrisy in there. So I you know, even though you're absolutely right, you're talking about the Pew survey, and there are so many surveys done that people, you know, in Islamic countries or in other countries, they actually want, even in UK, for example, majority of the Muslims, they want Sharia law. But if UK turns into Sharia law, Muslims in UK would be the first ones running away from it to probably America. You know, so I'm not very sure about, there's a kind of dichotomy, you know, they're kind of stuck in the middle.
And the dichotomy is in build. Why I said what I said is because we saw this in Pakistan or the time of independence, where loads, in fact, overwhelmingly, we know the results of 46 election. They voted for a Pakistan which was to be an Islamic Pakistan. It wasn't the case of it will be a non-Hindu secular nation. No, there wasn't a concept that Hindus will dominate us. So we want a non-Hindu secular nation. They wanted an Islamic nation. I think probably the dichotomy comes because they think the influence makers, they think in the new dispensation, they would still be safe as being in power. Though revolutions have taught us that when it starts sweeping, they will be swept aside. But when they do this mischief or when they put this poison in the well, I think at that stage, they believe they will be the ruling classes in the new dispensation. We don't have a proof of that, but that's how I see the situation.
But that is exactly how Ambedkar saw it as well. I mean, Darul Harb and Darul Islam, you know, basically he made this amazingly philosophical, clear-cut distinctions that are irrefutable because they go back to the Holy Scripture, you know. So what is written there is what is the absolute truth and what must be followed, and it is inviolable. So, you know, here again, I have this concept of good Muslim and bad Muslim. So if, for example, according to me, Zakir Naik is a hero, you know, people blast Zakir Naik all over the place. For me, I mean, he's God for me because he opened my eyes. You know, because of him, I read and reread all the religious scriptures, and I got to know so many things that were pulled under the carpet. And, you know, people would say one thing and they would mean the other. As I use the phrase very often, you would always snare the fundamentalists, but you know, spare the fundamentals. But if you go and read the fundamentals, it's all there, you know. But again, when you say when Pakistan was created, let's also not forget that it was created by a Shia, you know, who used to eat pork and drink alcohol. And the first speech that he gave on the creation of Pakistan was that he immediately said, we want Pakistan to be a secular state. And to be very honest, I think for a very long time, people were in a bind. Of course, it wasn't a secular state by any means, but it wasn't until Ziaul Haq and his Hudud ordinances that it actually became, you know, kind of a new Islamic state. So for about 20, 30, 40 years, it was, you know, teetering on the verge of, it was unsure where it belongs. And then slowly when the next generations, you know, came up, reading the books that dissociated Pakistan more and more away from the subcontinent and, you know, more and more towards the Arab world, towards, you know, where Islam took birth, then I think, you know, the people themselves started to believe that, yes, indeed, we really want these ordinances, you know, the Hudud ordinances. And then it actually, so now it is irreversible. Now you can't go back because then you pose this question to the Pakistani so-called liberals. that if you are against these ordinances, then you have the guts to stand up and say that these ordinances are wrong. But they can't be wrong, because then you won't be following the tenets of Allah. You see, so this dichotomy is stuck. So, there are a lot of Pakistanis who are upper middle class, who are writers, and, who kind of write a lot of novels and who appear in, their articles appear in magazines and all. So they're always blasting Pakistan for saying that, oh, it's no longer a country which is secular. It persecutes Ahmadiyyas. It kind of bombs, Sunni Sufi shrines. But they will never attack the fundamentals, because the fundamentals tell them to do this. So there are, for example, you can, if I can quote to you from a holy book about blasphemy. So, there were these cases of blasphemy, and people are saying, oh no, this is Pakistan is going into the dark ages. Again, they were snaring the fundamentalists. But these are the fundamentals that say those who abuse Allah and His Messenger, Allah has cursed them in this world and the hereafter, and prepared for them a humiliating punishment. 33:57. Indeed, the penalty for those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and strive upon earth to cause corruption is none, but that they be killed or crucified, or that their hands and feet be cut off from opposite sides, or that they be exiled from the land. This is for them a disgrace in this world, and for them in the hereafter is a great punishment. 533. So all these people, the kind of elite, so-called elite Pakistanis who write in English medium, when they criticize the fundamentalists, they don't dare criticize the fundamentals. They never once bring up the fundamentals. And same with the Ahmadiyyas. So heresy is a punishable offense in Islam. So they would never mention that. They would say, oh, Ahmadiyyas should not be persecuted, should not be prosecuted. So once you go along those lines, you cannot turn back.
Anand, that's a very relevant point when you say they don't attack the fund. See, in a nation where you could have a very dogmatic approach to religion, but if religion is not governing your way of life, if your civil law, criminal law is not based on religion, then it's an academic problem. Yeah. But if your religion is your official law, then it's no longer an academic problem. That's a problem in action. And Christianity, for that matter, had a big reform movement. We also 15th century, 16th century, huge reforms, everything, right? Here, there has not been a huge reform. That is the problem. But when you say Hindu Rashtra, do you not, and you discuss with your friends, what is the problem you face without having Hinduism as a governing law? Like Christianity or biblical tenets are not the governing law in US, even though they openly proclaim themselves to be a Christian country.
Yeah.
What do you see is the major opposition to a Hindu Rashtra in India? Or declaration?
Yeah, I think the major opposition to a Hindu Rashtra comes from the minorities.
One point I
want
to add.
Here we are, sorry, yeah, please.
Because people have asked me this question that temples are already taken over by the government.
Right.
And a lot of money is funding it. So relating it with that, what is the problem in calling it a Hindu Rashtra?
Right. So it's actually, for me, it's an issue more or less of redundancy. And I'll explain that. I mean, look at the irony of the spectacular, stunning irony of Hinduism, that there is a sect in Hinduism which promotes atheism. I mean, in which religion would you have this? In fact, quite the opposite. In fact, apostasy in Islam is punishable by death. And if I can quote to you, as I said, I would be heavily quoting from unnamed sources. No, named sources, but I would not. I don't have the courage, let's be very honest, because we don't have the laws in our country that protects free speech. So a lot of people would like to say a lot of things, but they can't.
Discrimination is the better part of valor when it comes to this.
I'm very happy I'm talking to a lawyer, to be honest. But if you look at, just a few of the verses from the Holy Book on apostates, indeed, those who have believed, then disbelieved, then believed, then disbelieved, and then increased in disbelief, never will Allah forgive them, nor will He guide them to a way. 4:137. Whoever disbelieves in Allah after his belief, except for one who is forced to renounce his religion, while his heart is secure in faith. But those who willingly open their breasts to disbelief, upon them is wrath from Allah, and for them is a great punishment. 16:16, and there are so many others. So in Hinduism, there isn't, I mean, there is Charvak philosophy, there are a lot of schools. It's, as I said, it's like a way of life. So there would be a redundancy. For me to say that, okay, right, I don't know what, how much different, first of all, how much different would a Hindu Rashtra be from what it is right now? So we know, for example, how much different would India be if it was a Sharia compliant or an Islamic state compared to what it is right now. We know it because we know the ordinances, they have been there, they're written in stone, like Pakistan's Hudud Ordinance. So we know there is a clear-cut demarcation. In the case of if India becomes a Hindu Rashtra, I personally haven't read much on this, but I'm not very sure how it would change from what it is already, So unless somebody tells me that these are the 6 differences that you would see in India being a Hindu Rashtra to what it is right now, then one can, I suppose, emphasize and elaborate or criticize and things of that sort.
Anand, what is your school of atheism? Does it say any religion? Because I was watching this very interesting thing by Neil deGrasse. He said, I don't use BCE, I still use BC. Because some scientists say use before Common Era because it is non-religious, whereas BC is of Jewish priests who brought it. But he says, I say Godspeed to a shuttle launch. It came in when Tesla, the shuttle launch. He says, I say Godspeed, even though its origin is in goodbye, God be with you. Yeah. Even though he calls himself an atheist, because he says some cultures and traditions have to be respected for the belief of people in those culture and traditions. So what is your, before I move to journalism and kitty parties, what is your final view of, should those cultural traditions be respected, even if you don't believe in them as a religious thing, or you think they should be kind of like communism, be kept away at all costs?
Right. So for me, atheism is, I would say, as I've already explained what I believe, but over and above that, it is an unshakable belief in science. Now, I'm not saying that it is unshakable belief that science is always right. No, it's that I believe, and then slowly science would uncover. It is a process of, progressive correction, renunciation of a lot of dogmas, prevailing dogmas, accepting a lot of new discoveries based on, proof, experiments, things of that sort. So I truly believe that we are a bunch of cells, Ishkaran, it's just chance that I'm XY, some people are XX. I have a discussion with Abhijit as to what it is. It's not very clear. Incidentally, I do want to discuss Abhijit after I've propounded on this. But I'm proud to be an Ethiopian. I see myself as an Ethiopian, to be honest, very honest with you, And I think if we were to see ourselves as a bunch of cells, if all of us, I think the first attack would be on our ego, The second would bring us humility. The third would say acceptance. But again, in acceptance, when you say that, should we accept all cultures? Yes, but there are a lot of tenets in a lot of cultures that can be hurtful, that can destroy you,
I will. Problem with this level of atheism, I'll tell you what would be there. Yeah. Then how do you, if you and me are just some chromosomes, why do we need to be moral? Why can the more powerful or the brighter not rule? Because morality stops us from doing this. Mm-hmm. Morality stops us from being a lion which will feed on a deer. If we become only a scientific certain molecules joining in a particular way, in a particular situation, atmosphere, then how do you bring morality in our conduct?
Okay, this is a great question. And one question that a lot of people have asked me, and I've written an article on this, but let me explain it. This is a great misconception about, and it stems, and why it's a great question is because this question has been rarely answered, which is that if you go by Darwinian theory of evolution, what it says is you adapt as you move along by changing environment, and it is survival of the fittest, which is actually true. But But what people forget is, incidentally, that this phrase survival of the fittest was not coined by Darwin, but it was introduced, I think, by Huxley into his second edition of The Origin of the Species. So it wasn't Darwin that coined this thing, but essentially it is true, survival of the fittest through adaptation. So what you're saying is that if you, the concept of morality doesn't come in, because if we were to treat ourselves merely as bunch of cells, the cells are just trying to out-compete, and the best cell or the best collection of cells is going to win. What's wrong in that? What people forget is that a huge endowment of human evolution and other evolutions is actually empathy. Now, this word did not exist when Darwin propounded his theory, but at that point of time, he used the word sympathy. Now, do you know that our brain has increased 3 times in volume in the last 3 million years because of cognitive interactions? So it is, this thing called empathy and social interactions and kindness, what you would say karuna, is an essential endowment. Human species cannot survive and be fitter or fittest if they don't have this endowment. So you cannot remove this aspect of empathy, morality, ethics from human evolution itself. So this is intrinsic to it, which a lot of people, when they talk of theory of evolution, they miss this aspect.
Anand, I will differ with you. I'll tell you why. I saw a study at Harvard where they made ordinary people, I think it was Harvard, they made ordinary people as jailers over some other ordinary people. Those ordinary people were not trained jailers. They knew they are an experiment.
Yeah.
They knew. So they knew they were not guards, they were not prisoners, they were an experiment. And they saw over a period of 3 months how those in authority started abusing power. So tomorrow, if I make you a guard, even though an experiment, you will start abusing your authority. That is what the experiment found, because the power corrupts.
Right.
So this morality without a belief in a superior being or a karma or heaven or hell, whatever concept they believe in, and everything is just transient and on earth. If enough people actually believed it, I think morality will take a massive, massive hit, because then you are not worried that next janam I could be facing what I am doing this janam. Or if you don't believe in karma, you might not face din of Jannat or day of judgment will come. So how do you react to that? You really think that if people didn't have numbers, big numbers were atheists, you would still have morality in society?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking of is the famous Stanford experiment. I think it was done in the 50s, I'm not mistaken. It's a wonderful, I think, TV series or a film that was made on it. It's eminently watchable. But it was, again, a limited experiment. There are so many other experiments that people have done. In fact, I don't have, at hand, I can give you a lot of studies where people say that belief in atheism leads to a lot of, I can't remember the exact words, but, it includes morality, it includes kindness, it includes a lot of other tenets that essentially are tagged along when you're talking about survival of the fittest. Devoid of this, what you get is social Darwinism, which is what imperialists used to do. For example, you wipe out, you annihilate whole civilizations. So the Spaniards go to Latin America, they destroy a whole huge continent, almost the whole continent. Or, the Brits or the Australians, the way they treated Aborigines, they decimated the whole population of Tasmania, and they were proud of it because according to them, they were doing what was endowment of the theory of evolution, which is that we are the fittest, we are going to survive. So they would say, for example, that, you may have bows and arrows, but we have guns and we can kill 20 of you, right, from a far distance. So who's fitter? But slowly over, as science developed and as you learned, it was purely adaptation. So, you may have a gun when you are in an urban setting, but, probably a gun is not very useful in very many other settings where bow and arrows would be useful, The other aspect, of course, is when you're talking of theory of evolution, that one thing that you must, and I always get, I always block people who call me communist, by the way, because, communists are not atheists. I can go on, and I've written on this as well. They're sham atheists. They call themselves atheists, but they're not. They believe in this religion, which is Marxism, and B, you could not satisfactorily call yourself an atheist until you were resolutely a believer in the Darwin theory of evolution or Hubble's theory and the experiment. So, for about 100 years or 70, 80 odd years, the theory of evolution was not sacrosanct. It did not become an axiom until the 90s, as I said. So, plus, you have the Lysenko, the whole era of Lysenko, so sham science, believe in Marxism. So they're not atheists at all. If you're not able to explain why you are an atheist, you just say that you are an atheist, you don't believe in, the religion which is common. It's not a belief in religion. It's a belief whether God exists or not. So there are, various, I don't want to call them sects of atheism, but there are atheists and there are atheists. So I think the best qualifier would be Darwinian atheists, which is that, people who believe in the Darwinian theory of evolution is actually an axiom.
Anand, we have to shift on the topic, though I would wish I had a few, because see, when you have in atheism also, if you start having schools, then doesn't atheism with schools become the new religion? With people believing in different viewpoints of your viewpoint exactly as you say, and those who believe in it versus those who have different viewpoints on atheism will become a very, I believe, a tricky debate, but I will not.
It is tricky. But sorry, Ishkaran, can I, because we mentioned Abhijit, and I just wanted to say something, because he's our friend, as you know, and he's appeared on your show as well. And there's been a campaign going on, I don't know whether you're aware, against him for the last couple of days. He tweeted something which a lot of people found to be hateful. Okay. And this tweet was in response to some person. And for the next 2 days or so, everyone, all journalists, the people, they tagged his employers, they tagged the people he was writing for, and said, sack him, sack. You know how it goes. You know how the Twitter cycle goes. Sack him. What is this? And this hateful bigot, hate. And then they tagged his employers, I think Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, I think in Delhi. And then the employer said that we are looking into this. It's an internal, so all that thing has been going on. So I thought this would be a nice platform to comment upon the prevailing atmosphere of what people perceive as hate, because I don't condone what he said. Obviously, I wouldn't say it. But then I'm not a hypocrite, because according to me, it is very difficult to define what hate is. So it is much better to say that, accept or allow everything that you may consider as hateful or others may consider, rather than saying that, no, this according to me is hateful and this isn't. So here is what I want to say, that, if the employers of Abhijit have considered what he said was hate, if tomorrow Abhijit were to tweet these words that I'm going to say, what would they say? Would they say this is hate as well? So let me just say these words. Indeed, they who disbelieved among the people of the scripture, i.e. the Jews, and the polytheists. Now, polytheists are pagans, or Hinduism is also considered as a polytheistic religion, according to, Radhakrishnan and Vivekananda and everything. The polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of creatures. If I were to tweet this, or if Abhijit were to tweet this to his employer, would the employer say this was hate? Right? I'm not going to make a comment, and I don't want you to say that this is hate as well, because we'll be in problem otherwise. But I just want to say these are I'm quoting verbatim from the Holy Scriptures. Do not marry the polytheist women unless they come to believe in Islam. A Muslim slave girl is better than a polytheist woman, even though she may attract you. And do not give your women in marriage to polytheist men unless they come to believe in Islam. A Muslim slave is better than a polytheist, even though he may attract you. 2:21. Is this hate? I want to ask Abhijit's employer and all those who said Abhijit is a hateful bigot. Indeed, those who disbelieve in our verses, we will drive them into a fire. Every time their skins are roasted through, we will replace them with other skins so they may taste the punishment. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted in might and wise. 4:56. O Prophet, fight against the disbelievers and the hypocrites and be harsh upon them. And their refuge is hell, and wretched is the destination. 973. Indeed, you disbelievers and what you worship other than Allah are the firewood of hell. You will be coming to enter it. 2198. And whosoever has not believed in Allah and his messenger, then indeed we have prepared for the disbelievers a blaze. 48:13. Indeed, Allah has cursed the disbelievers and prepared for them a blaze. 33:64. The day their faces will be turned about in the fire, they will say, how we wish we had obeyed Allah and obeyed the messenger. 33:66. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieved. So strike them upon the necks and strike from them every fingertip. 8:12. Those who disbelieved will have cut out from them garments of fire. Poured upon their heads will be scalding water. 22:19. By which is melted that within their bellies and their skins. 22:20. And for striking them are maces of iron. 22:21. Every time they want to get out of hellfire from anguish, they will be returned to it. And it will be said, taste the punishment of the burning fire. 22:22. Indeed, the worst of living creatures in the sight of Allah are those who have disbelieved, and they will not ever believe. 8:55. We will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve for what they have associated with Allah, of which he had not sent down any authority, and their refuge will be the fire, and wretched is the residence of the wrongdoers. 3:151. And the day those who disbelieved are exposed to the fire, it will be said, is this not the truth? They will say, yes, by our Lord, he will say. Then taste the punishment because you used to disbelieve. 46:34. Indeed, those who disbelieve, never will their wealth or their children avail them against Allah at all. And it is they who are the fuel for the fire. 3:10. Those who believe fight in the cause of Allah, and those who disbelieve fight in the cause of Taghut. So fight against the allies of Satan. Indeed, the plot of Satan has ever been weak. 476. It is not for the polytheists to maintain the mosques of Allah while witnessing against themselves with disbelief. For those, their deeds have become worthless, and in the fire they will abide eternally. 9:17. You who have believed, fight those adjacent to you of the disbelievers and let them find in you harshness, and know that Allah is the righteous. 9:123. O you who have believed, do not take your fathers or your brothers as allies if they have preferred disbelief over belief. And whoever does so among you, then it is those who are the wrongdoers. Now, if I were to tweet this, make a thread of this, or if Abhijit were to tweet this and make a thread of this, what would I want to ask this to all those people who are saying that this is hate, this isn't hate? What are you going to say? Are you going to say this is hateful, what I have just narrated? And if you do, then you stand in the court of Allah. Are you ready for it? So here is the dichotomy that we pronounce so easily what is hateful, what isn't. But we seem to be giving a blank check to a lot of things that are not perceived as hateful at all. Here is the hypocrisy of the people who say, sack him, sack that guy, he has been hateful. So I want to understand, maybe, from the perspective of law, for how long is this tenable? Aren't the eyes of the people being opened?
Anand, you have read exact quotes, and thank you for reading it, because people have to know the exact quotes. And you're right, if without attribution, you spoke a lot of this, you would be in serious trouble. And I have had personal experience, because I got a case where somebody wrote Hindu Phal Dukan in Jamshedpur. So a lot of people contacted me. I just put out a tweet that there is nothing wrong in saying Hindu Phal Dukan because you can say halal.
Yeah.
So it's a process. Even in Hindu Phal Dukan, there is no process. That got a lot of retweets, and that gentleman, somehow it reached him in Jamshedpur. He called me up. Then he showed me that there are 200, 300 calls he's gotten of threatening him because he wrote Hindu Phal Dukan. I tweeted to Jharkhand police. They were kind enough. They registered a case on people threatening him. But see, that's why I wanted to bring this. There are two aspects to it. One is the economic boycott or your job boycott. The second is how criminal law is put into motion against you. And it's very easy. 2 days, people will care about you, give you sympathy. I have seen cases after 10 days, not even your best friend comes to support you. They say, yaar, baar phone karke tang kar raha. Very bad, very bad.
Tiwari is one example.
Very bad, very bad. Life carries on. Yeah. This is the reason I believe we need to dilute these laws. Yeah. And in Abhijit's case, frankly, I do not know what he exactly tweeted. He's a great guy with a very salty tongue, so one doesn't know what he's actually tweeted.
Can I do this?
So one does not know what exactly he said, but this I would definitely agree that there is a systematic campaign, even of India people.
Yeah,
because they wrote factual piece on what is halal. It's a fact. It's an absolute fact-based piece. In fact, I hope nobody issues a statement on you for you reading. In fact, on this debate, I saw somebody saying you quote from a text and mock us. Yeah. The famous person you called a kitty party journalist. Yeah. So I saw that tweet saying, how can you mock somebody when you're reading literally from a text? But that is the sort of discourse in this country. And you never know, they could come after you also for literally reading something by saying the tone was mocking. Yeah. And I do not know as a lawyer, I'm telling you, that if tomorrow they start going, tone was mocking, and some court issues notice, we could actually head into, it might sound very weird when I'm saying that the tone wasn't this or the tone was that, but I won't be very surprised if tomorrow people go into this area also.
My God.
We are shutting down debate.
But where does law, for example, Ishkaran, stand on the tone of saying things?
I have no case I've heard of it up till now.
Right.
Where we are going, one doesn't know. Up till now, I have heard no case of this sort. I'll be very frank with you. But you never know, because the problem which we are facing is people are organized. Social media has started an organized way also, where you see this economic boycotts of that chef in Dubai, I think, who lost his job, went into depression. Again, I've forgotten the exact tweet. But this is all organized. Yeah. And unfortunately, our laws are not coming down, because this, I would tell you, all governments love power.
Yeah.
So you are not seeing these laws being diluted. Yeah. And this be BJP, this be Congress, you will not see laws restricting your speech diluted.
Yes.
I am not hopeful of that at all, especially after what happened with 66A, where whatever we may say, we all know what happened in courts.
Correct. And also, isn't it ironical, Ishkaran, that British India was less restrictive on freedom of speech than the modern republic? You know, I mean, as you quoted Rangila Rasool. In fact, Rangila Rasool was the booklet was a rebuttal to Muslims who had insulted, I think, Sita. You know, called her names and all that. So this booklet was published, and in fact, Gandhi wanted nothing to do with Rangila. He blasted. He said there should be a law. Such things are not. And Ambedkar said, no, I support the publisher of Rangila Rasool. So when someone like Gandhi would say something like that, then the law came. But before that, 295A wasn't there. You could actually say and criticize things. So it's really ironical. And I actually, people may say it's a cliche, but I truly blame Nehru, because he was endowed with a lot of qualities which, a lot of liberals love to, kind of say that, oh, look, he was liberal, he was this and that. India was a cradle, and he literally, you can say he gave birth to this country. He formed laws. Ambedkar, of course, did. So those were our forefathers. Nehru was a forefather. It was on him, to say that, look, I will protect freedom of speech and expression, and you can have, I remove these laws. In fact, he went the other way. As Tripur Daman's book also talks about the First Amendment, and there are about 50 or 60 things that, he did, which people even now would shiver. Today, prime ministers would shiver doing that, banning books, jailing people, all sorts of things. And he is supposedly a liberal. And his image is that Nehru was a liberal. So when you have your forefathers condemning the new generation to this, I don't think India has any hope, to be honest with you.
No, I think India has a lot of hope. I'll tell you why. Because we are finding ways out. Technology, to a degree, is breaking down a lot of barriers and giving us hope. Otherwise, as you said rightly, a Majroo Sultanpuri could be jailed for 1 year, a famous lyricist, for not even something very serious. I think he called Nehru
Hitler ka chela. He called it in a poem, he called Nehru Hitler ka chela for siding with the Commonwealth. That's it.
That's hardly anything. That's as light a comment as it can be. We have Congress every day calling Prime Minister God knows what. But where I want to say, why this hate, I'm thinking, they can brand, they started branding the word Bhakt as a derogatory word. Enough people owned it, took pride in it, so people don't mind it. But the purpose behind calling somebody a Bhakt in this last 10 years political discourse was to insult him.
Yeah.
The reason behind, the intention behind Sanghi was to insult him. For once, I am very proud that all people of Sanatan Dharam did not get insulted and made Bhagwa flags higher and said, "Hum bhakt hain, ye hain." They fought it at an intellectual level. Without
it's like the N-word. You know, the N-word has been appropriated. If you watch Pulp Fiction, you know, all the African Americans are using it much more than anybody else, you know, and they use it with pride. They use it as an exclamation.
But there only they can use it. Other communities do it, that's still a, you know. Here, Bhakt, I feel very good. That's why I'm saying there's hope, the question of hope. I did not think that people will so proudly own up to the fact that, okay, hum Bhakt hain, hame koi problem nahi, isse hum better hain. It could have gone the other way, which is what they were trying to do, saffron terror.
Yeah.
At a higher level, that was the entire frame. Saffron terror to Bhakt, who are smallly involved in this. So there I do see hope. But when you talk about how Nehru set up the entire system...
Are you saying that, you know, Arpians have also appropriated Aptard and, you know, Congis, Pidis? So I don't know.
They haven't managed to succeed in doing it. See, that's the difference. See, Bhakt today, you would see a lot of people saying Bhakt without feeling. You would see...
The Twitter bio, proud Bhakt, yeah.
You will not see a proud Aptard. So, that is why I'm optimistic, either by accident or design, that the society's resistance to proud Bhakt, and you see, you just Google Bhakt, you will find a lot of people proudly saying it. So words have a power, but if you turn it on them, flip it on them, then it becomes a powerful weapon. And this is new.
Like, for example, queer, you know, I mean, the etymology of queer is strange. Now, 100 years ago, you called a homosexual a queer, it was very offensive. But they have appropriated this. In fact, the queer movement. So, you know, when you have homosexuals, gays have appropriated this word queer. So,
so sometimes I think flipping the words is a better strategy than...
but, you know, the funny thing is you had Manish Tiwari. He was the information and broadcasting minister, if you remember, in the UPA.
Yes.
And he came down hard on a lot of policies. He, you know, a lot of draconian policies. He curbed a lot of freedom of expression, censorship and all that. And the moment UPA went out of power, he wrote this article and I tweeted it. And I was proud of the guy. He said the clause 2 of Article 19(1)A should go. Same guy. Now, you know, what is the guarantee if Congress comes to power? I don't know, maybe how long it will take. But will he stick to this stand or will he revert to the other stand? So, you know, there is so much hypocrisy going on. People, even lawyers, when they profess their view, they're not steadfast on it. And that's a real tragedy, you know.
Let me defend my profession.
Right.
It is akin to a surgeon than a... See, when you are in a court and you are arguing a case, it is not always about your ideology. Sometimes it can be, but it is not. It is like a doctor operating. Is a parallel. A lot of laymen will not agree with. I know what I'm saying.
I hold the same view.
I'll get 5,000 comments saying that ye galat baat hai, but it is true. Sometimes they argue on ideology. Sometimes they don't. But interesting point I would tell you. What Manish Tiwari said. Do you know most of the reason Chidambaram is in jail or was in jail were laws he passed, giving more powers to enforcement agencies. These are his laws because he... See, the problem is, that is why I always say, even for BJP, please don't believe you are going to be in a 1,000-year wake.
Yeah.
You would go out of power, make the laws. Chidambaram's, most of these attachment of his properties, etc., are laws, amendments he passed through the parliament, and now he challenges them as being unconstitutional in the court, or his lawyers do.
Yeah.
That dichotomy is there. But coming to the dichotomy, let's talk about liberalism, because I do not think so there is a word with more hypocrisy in India than liberalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
How
But
do
can
you
I ask you something before we come to this, which is that, wasn't Dr. Swamy also in Supreme Court fighting, as a supporter for hate speech not being prosecuted? And I love that. But what happened to that case? Did Supreme Court rule on that, or?
those days, I was very intrinsically involved. We filed two cases. One against defamation.
Right.
Criminal
Oh, the
offense.
criminal and civil defamation. That's right. Yeah.
Defamation being because we are one of the few countries which have defamation as a criminal offense.
Yeah.
It's a thing which, if you say wrong, you can quantify damages and give you damages. We are one of the few countries, and that had happened because Jayalalitha, those times the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, had filed cases in bulk.
Yes. Yes.
So we went to court. Interestingly, that time in defamation, after Dr. Swamy's petition got admitted and he got a stay that the prosecution cannot take any adverse steps or cannot, arrest him, basically in layman language. We got a stay. Then Rahul Gandhi jumped in with the same petition saying defamation be decriminalized. And then Rajdeep Sardesai joined in. Then Arvind Kejriwal joined in. So they all joined in because at that time, nobody had challenged the constitutional validity. Right. Unfortunately, I think court missed a big opportunity there of either striking it down or reading it down. They missed opportunity. And the same is with hate speech. He gave a lecture in Assam University, and that time Congress government in Assam filed a case for a lecture in a university as a hate speech case. So he came to the Supreme Court, and it was a very normal lecture by his standards. So not a very, it was a university lecture.
Yeah.
So that case is still pending. Let's hope how it goes. But as I told you, I am not very optimistic. If we could not convince the court of defamation, convincing them that to strike down hate speech would be tougher, but hopefully some guidelines would come. And sometimes the courts change their mind, like we saw in section 377.
Yes.
So that changed. But coming to liberalism, you had a famous run-in with a liberal journalist, so-called liberal journalist, also a secular journalist.
And this is what I always am. In fact, Rahul Roshan, who's a very good friend of both of us, he used to earlier make this distinction, which is that he used to call these pseudo-liberals as liberals with quotes. He used to always, put quotes in front of liberals, and which is correct. They're not liberals, We are the liberals. But now I think in his, because he's at war, Rahul is at war. So he stopped putting those quotes. So now he addresses them as liberals, And they love it.
So I saw that clip, and I will, for 1 second, if I play it for the audience, so everybody has already seen it. Let me just play it. I think I'd saved it someplace, but I'll in the meanwhile tell you. So I noticed that she had taken your name, attacked you for no reason.
Yeah.
And then when your time came and you exposed that what you do is basically a kitty party journalism, immediately it went back to you quote from a particular text and mock us. And second, it went back to misogyny and feminist comments. So how do you see this liberalism debate, and what was the reason that this clique sticks together, attacks together? How is your, and you have seen two bastions of liberalism, academia as well as media.
Yeah.
So what is your experience in both of them, and how do you think they survive and they thrive? What's the reason for their surviving and thriving?
Yeah, so basically, one of the things that, let's say luckily one of the very few things, if at all, that I have imbibed from Dr. Swamy is his Twitter bio, where he says, I give as good as I get. So I don't go after people. You would have seen that, also because, as a saying, let the sleeping dogs lie, So I don't. But if somebody comes after me, then they better be prepared. And, and repeatedly, that journalist came after me. So I said, all right, well, let me open up the floodgates. But this is, Ishkaran, this is a well-known strategy. You accuse, you shoot, and then you scoot. And while you're scooting, you flash out the victim card. Now, there is nothing misogynist that I said. There was nothing, accusatory that was wrong on facts. So I was quoting absolute facts, and in fact, there is a clip that proves that this is true. So these things keep on happening, and people have realized, look, I mean, you can fool someone some of the time, but it's almost impossible to fool all of the people all of the time. And you could have fooled people before social media, which these people were for decades, and your only option was to fling the newspaper that you've read against the wall and say, oh my God, what utter rubbish is this? But now you have, you have so many channels to kind of vent your outrage or anger or, whatever, you can formulate your anger into a piece and you can write it, which, so many people are doing. You may not agree with what they're saying, the counterpoint, but at least you have a platform to put your counterpoint. And this is what scares them. They're not, if you remember, I think 2-3 years ago, they invited a couple of RSS people to the Jaipur Literature Festival. There were half a dozen articles written that I am boycotting it. How dare they? So, when you talk of freedom of speech and expression, when you have, as that everything should be, then you realize that these are exactly the guys who are going to curb the freedom of speech and expression. So when it dawns on you, then it's a fair game,
I have to tell you, we have more than 1,000 people hearing us live right now. Somebody just said 1,000 people alert. So all of you who are watching, please share the video. And because these are some very reasoned views. One of the reasons we do this is because Anand, what he speaks in 2 minutes, I wanted you to hear his soundness of logic behind that 2-minute clip you see. And I'm very, very happy that 1,000 people are hearing it live right now. So
wonderful.
Share it and do subscribe to the channel. So, and do like the video.
गालियां भी पढ़ रही हैं कि नहीं पढ़ रही हैं? I love the गालियां.
गालियां तो बहुत पढ़ेंगी जब ये मेरी ऑडियंस सारी नेशनलिस्ट ऑडियंस है. Audience में घूमने दो. I have to play this clip for people who missed it, though I hardly think anybody missed it. This is Anand saying on Kitty Party, and then I have a specific question for him.
Yeah.
I don't know about Tahir Hussain, but she is definitely a history sheeter. Let me just give you a few examples of her quote-unquote journalism. She wanted a referendum on Kashmir and said, and I quote, I am not advocating Indian rule in Kashmir. She peddled fake news and incendiary theories about the Godhra train burning, peddled the fake church attacks on beads, saying Christians were under attack, when all those attacks weren't communal at all, but actually burglaries or casual vandalism. She is selective to the point of being insane, outraging only on Hindu hate crimes, while being totally silent on more than 150 hate crimes perpetrated by Hindus on Hindus by Muslim mobs. She spread fake news about the ABVP anti-CA protest, about a Dalit man murdered for entering a temple, about a Muslim driver,
you will get as good as you get. You need to keep quiet and listen.
And here she interrupts me again.
You have to say. You want to talk about me?
She is not going to keep quiet because I think deep down she hates Kafirs. I don't know which book she reads every morning. It makes her hate Kafirs so much. This Kitty Party journalist is not going to be quiet.
You've got a job somewhere because of the government.
Rahul, I don't know what to do. She fails to disclose that she was appointed by Aam Aadmi Party to a Delhi University college governing body. She uses rape analogies freely, as she did for Bhansali. I can go on and on and on. Suffice it to say that she is a stinging indictment on our education system.
Okay. Since you have called her a stinging indictment of education system, 3 points of this I want to discuss. First, the church attack narrative.
Yeah.
That was entirely created, manufactured out of thin air. That is why I say they still have influence. It's only if they're losing elections. Let a result flip and we would all be in for misery. As unfortunately a person we are seeing happening with a big journalist, Arnab Goswami. Just one state has come and we both go on his debates. And you're seeing that sort of harassment he's facing. So this fake narrative peddled by the likes of her, how do you counter that, and do you believe India is successfully countering it?
So let me put it this way. I think Indians are successfully countering it. And of course, you fooled once, twice, thrice, and then you kind of reason up, and then you say, so for example, anyone you meet, I mean, in the field of science, for example, even in patents, there is something called, the phrase called prior art, so that you have to look at the background before you, see a new discovery. Has it been made before? Has, on what basis has this new discovery being made? What are the foundations of it? So by practice, by intuition, I judge people like that as well. So, it may be that, this journalist might say something sensible. I mean, of course, even a broken clock, as I told to one of the Poonawallahs, the other one, not the sensible and the logical one. Yes. So I said even a broken clock gives you the correct time twice. But the point is, you intuitively look at the history. That's why I use the word history sheeter. Now, if someone has been lying for like last 6 years, and someone has been spreading fake narrative, 200 instances of fake narratives, fake news, lying, propaganda, and then suddenly you say something good, well, I'm not going to change my opinion of that person. It's like Tipu Sultan. You demolish, 1,000 temples, 100 churches, you convert lakhs of Hindus, you murder lakhs of them, and then you contribute some money to rebuild a mutt. And you see how it goes. So, you look at the friends, the company they keep. You look at who their heroes are: Aurangzeb, Tipu, Babur, Mao, Che, and then you make an informed opinion. So, and that opinion, I'm afraid, unless they abjure all these horrendous, qualities and characteristics that they have, my opinion of them is not going to change, even if they come up with one intelligent theory,
But what is this history? Because you gave some things in brief and she was just constantly interrupting you. But I noticed very interestingly on content of the history you read out, there was not one tweet saying that the content was wrong. It was either misogyny, or it was vileness, or it was, what we call without attacking the content. So what was the most egregious things you found in her journalism? Let's discuss if we can call it journalism. What were the most egregious things you found in that you spoke for that 2 minute very effectively?
No, I think, you just have to, it was by memory. As it happens, I missed out probably 90%. So I could only quote 10% of it. It's like one guy I addressed as Michelangelo of Hypocrisy. You named him also, during this course of this discussion. Yeah. And so basically, you can, at best, within 30 seconds, you can quote 3 or 4 misdemeanors of these people. You miss out 300. But over time, you build a picture of the person. So, and if you read, this, I'm talking of before Twitter, Godhra happened in 2002. The kind of articles that were written that went without rebuttal. Yeah. So, and when you read them and then you see the kind of things that were going on, that, they were like unchallenged propaganda. So, but I also have to say this, because you asked me that, are people able to, a lot of Indians now, there's so many fact checkers now. And by fact checkers, I mean common, people who are on Twitter. They have wonderful names as well. There's one who's called Crime Master Gogo V2, and there's Ankur. There's so many people. So it's the common people who are doing it. And the fact is, the government doesn't do it. Now, when you had the Christian church attacks, the government could so easily have pulled out the statistics, so easily, within a week, but they didn't for 3 weeks, And after 3 weeks, it came out that these are all arson, they're burglaries, they're not communal at all. That a year ago, same number of churches were attacked as the number of temples were attacked for burglaries and all that. Government could have done it. It's $1 billion corporation. If they want, they can bust these things. So, there is a lot of anger. Why is the government not doing it? And everyone, all of us were angry. So I asked one BJP politician, कि क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं आप? हम पे क्यों छोड़ रहे हैं? In the sense, common citizens पे क्यों छोड़ रहे हैं कि ये fake news का expose करो ये वो? You can pay people to do it. You can organize this so it comes out, within a week. And then he said something really interesting. He said, अगर हम ये करेंगे तो आग कैसे लगी रहेगी हमारे कार्यकर्ताओं? So, but to take an example of one channel which begins with N, if that N channel is not there, right, people will not be outraged enough. So it is in the interests of the BJP to keep such things alive, And this is how politics destroys the country, because the image of India is, at the end, the image of India is what is being attacked and being sullied abroad and here. If that propaganda had been demolished in 2 days, there wouldn't have been 200 articles written on it all around the world that, Christians are being attacked, or, so this is the harm selectivity does. That's the problem.
Anand, somebody just said we should call you our very own Jordan Peterson, another professor who's very famous. But and this because you wrote Selectivity and Propaganda. I had just done a program on this person, Siddharth Vidrajan, and yeah. I was shocked to say that that person, and I would quote his article, famous article, he said, it's a dangerous delusion to believe the Gujarat violence occurred because of Godhra. The Gujarat violence happened because the government wanted it to happen. Godhra was just the excuse. This is the sort of vile crap they used to publish. And we are lucky that in times of Shaheen Bagh, we have seen this Tahir Hussain, everybody defending Amanatullah Khan, and AAP leader comes out and says he's just being charge sheeted because he is a Muslim.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So when you run that,
they have 3 or 4 aces up their sleeve. They have been using it for 7-8 years, so now everyone understands it. The first one is victim card, obviously. The second one is, and it's all WhatsApp. They will bring in context. Okay, so be sure to know that whatever verse you have or I have said, they're going to say you have picked it out of context. So anything that disagrees with their point of view, the context card comes in. First the victim card, then the context card. Then comes the whataboutery card. But they don't understand that whataboutery is good and everyone indulges in it. And most of all, they do. When they, for example, just to give you one example, yesterday we were all talking about that terrible tragedy of the elephant and the pregnant elephant. And the people, at least till yesterday, it was on Twitter that people from the minority community have been charged. So immediately the thing came out that, look, in Pilibhit in 2019, a tiger was also attacked. So, somebody can say, what about the tiger? You see what I mean? So when it suits them. So for example, there was in Kolkata, a bridge collapsed. Suddenly it came out that, last year, 23 bridges collapsed in Gujarat, in BJP ruled states. So when you talk of Vaishno Devi, when you talk of Hajj, they talk of Vaishno Devi. When you talk of one thing, they talk of, so, this kind of, and the difference is that while whataboutery is essential to expose hypocrisy of a person, because they themselves are by definition hypocrites, they deride whataboutery, but they are the first ones to take recourse to it to expose hypocrisy or to say, why are you being selective? Why don't you quote this as well? So their whole edifice is built on hypocrisy. You have to understand, anyone who still worships Che or Mao, who killed 63 million of his own people, has to be a hypocrite. There is no other word for it.
But Anand, what is very interesting in whataboutery, you say, they would never say, when they compare one bridge fell here and 20 fell there, they would never say temples are taken over by government.
Yeah.
They would never talk about their own religious places not being taken over by government. So even in whataboutery, it's very selective.
Yes.
Targeted. But my question to you is, and this is something I struggle with, do you think India has fundamentally changed, or do you think we have a very, I'm not getting into a flow of adjectives to praise the Prime Minister, but let's say we have a very charismatic Prime Minister who gets the votes.
Yeah.
Is it more a voting based on the performance of the Prime Minister, or do you think there has a structural change which has occurred in Indians' mind and voting pattern? What do you think? It's a personality-led change, and if this personality, or is it a structural, permanent change?
I think it's a bit of both. Let me be very honest. I think 2019 was won on the back of genuine development. If you were to look at Ujjwala, for example, and there are a host of other things, banking, Ayushman Bharat. So there were 3 or 4 schemes that genuinely showed results. And it's not that, people from only one community were able to benefit from it. Ujjwala is a prime example. And it is not that, only some people find this scheme to be working. There has been tremendous, in fact, Nature publication, Nature Energy, had a very detailed analysis of Ujjwala. So, 3 or 4 such schemes, plus, of course, the charisma of Narendra Modi, won him 2019. As to what will win him 2024, of course, one can't be sure. But, once you have peddled is a wrong word, but once you have exposed the development card, you can't, to give you an example, can you name one scheme in the last 1 year that sticks in your mind? I can't. All I think of is Kashmir 370 CA. So it's more political. It's more, you can say, polarizing. It has polarized the voters because there are some illogical and irrational people who are against the abrogation. There were some illogical and irrational people who are against the CAA being brought in. But you cannot deny that it has also polarized. So I don't know what future holds as far as 2024 is concerned. But let me just take this example in the 60s, I think. And Naipaul talks of this in his second book of his India trilogy, where he met R.K. Narayan, the great Indian novelist. And Naipaul was a young guy then, and he was really outraged and asked, why aren't things working in India? Come on, you're a young country, go forward, this, that, and all sorts of, he's like very angry. And R.K. Narayan said something which stuck in Naipaul's head, and it's stuck in my head as well. He said, my dear friend, India is like a river. It is continuously flowing. All you can do is you can dip in it from time to time. So, as to people saying that India has changed, the character has changed, no, it's status quo. You may have incremental changes. You may have things for the better, for the worse. But I don't think, especially as far as the economy is concerned, Ishkaran, it is a left-wing government. Let's be honest about it. As far as the social changes are concerned, Ram Mandir was out of its hands. It was not because of BJP, to be honest with you. Triple Talaq was, but that's another thing that does not hit the majority population. But as far as development is concerned, I can't think of, now there are reforms, but because of Corona, for example, agriculture reforms are there. Just today or last week, you had the, what was that, couple of acts that have been reformed. APMC has been reformed, and some other act, I forget.
Sorry to interrupt, because my question was not subject to only Prime Minister Modi. That is one aspect of it.
Yeah.
My question is, victory is when no matter which the government, they have to follow the agenda of the people, because the agenda has shifted. Like Rahul Gandhi had to wear a Janeyu. He tried to. He had to, because that imagery had come into people's mind, and that was giving returns, right? Do you think a Nehruvian consensus which used to exist, has it been bashed only by the personality of Prime Minister, or that consensus has shifted to a Hindutvadi consensus where Ashok Gehlot or a Kamal Nath or a Captain Amrinder Singh all proudly, no matter what they do, wing, wing, nudge, nudge, but proudly, like US, no matter what side you come, you say we are a Christian candidate. Nobody comes and says we are a non-Christian candidate.
Yeah.
Do you think in the structural mindset of India, that change has occurred, or do you think that change has not occurred? Not with vis-a-vis election of the Prime Minister. Do you think the Congress candidate would need to do this imagery and symbolism, or he can win without this imagery and symbolism?
Yeah, I think, again, you see, it depends on the demography of the constituency. So, for example, I don't foresee AIMIM candidates with, doing this.
Larger.
Right. In the larger scheme of things, yes. And you're right. But I don't see it as a dramatic shift. I think Congress has always been doing this. Do you know, for example, that in Madhya Pradesh, when Congress was ruling, if you wanted a gun license, right, they keep on lampooning BJP as cow lovers and things of that sort. But in Madhya Pradesh, if you want a gun license, you have to adopt a Gau Raksha, a cattle pen or things of that sort. And there are so many other examples like that. You had Harsh Rawat, who was a Congress chief, but he said, if you kill cow, go to Pakistan. So many things like that. So, but whether it is genuine change or a deception is very hard to say, because, Congress obviously is as a folk tongue. You can never be sure.
And we also saw a big debate on nationalism in 2019 election, and it's becoming more, because nation states after Trump's election, if China situations, I think they just banned flights from China. and trade war had started before this.
Yeah.
So what's your view on nationalism, and especially nationalism in Indian context?
Right. So, in fact, I'm so sorry, we've kind of gone so tangential. It's like, from like a multiverse visit from one universe to another. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, this was going to be the main theme which we're discussing in the last 5 minutes or so. But and it was to be isms, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, I mean, as I say, you mock and ridicule all isms except criticism. But as far as nationalism is concerned, I have written, Ishkaran, extensively on it. I think nationalism is anti-science. There is nothing that patriotism cannot do in peacetime that you need nationalism for. And I have expounded on it in great detail. The whole damn problem started when in 2013, some Bloomberg or some journalist went to interview Narendra Modi and asked him, "Are you a Hindu? What are you?" He said, "Yes, I am a Hindu and I am a Hindu nationalist." Had he said, "I am a Hindu patriot," ये हम discussion ही नहीं कर रहे होते, because and I have shown it, I have proved it, that the overriding inherent quality of Hinduism that is also imbibed by Narendra Modi is actually Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, many may say that, look, it doesn't mean what it says, that there is a Panchatantra tale, that it is this and that. What I'm saying is that forget about where this phrase comes from, if you want to disregard that. Just look at the beauty of the phrase, which is the world is a family, and India has believed it. So, and I just to quote you, and Narendra Modi believes this. So he is a Hindu patriot, and nationalism is, again, what happens is that nationalism turns you into a supremacist. It's almost an exclusivist. So if you look at a lot of communist regimes, a lot of theocratic Islamics, they are nationalists. They are exclusivist. It is against mixing. It creates that kind of ego, very tribal thing. Whereas patriotism doesn't do that. And India, just to give you one example, of how we think that the world is a family. Let me just tell you, I'm quoting from the paper that I wrote. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Let me read it out to you. India is a vital cog in the global trade. We are a vibrant democracy and have friendly relations with most countries of the world. We trade goods worth 620 billion with 194 nations and rank impressively on the overall trade restrictiveness index. We welcome all with open arms. Our ranked 34th most friendly country. Our refugee policy, says the UNHCR chief, is an example for the world to follow. We have committed ourselves to the Paris climate deal, even though it would mean sacrificing on the speed of growth that all rich countries before us shied away from. We gave asylum to the Dalai Lama when most other countries would have been reluctant to for fear of antagonizing China, because it was the right thing to do. We cut off all relationships with apartheid South Africa to our enormous economic detriment, even as Britons and Americans did not. The guardians of human rights, they never did, but we did, because it was the right thing to do. All these are not traits displayed by a nation full of nationalists. And then I go on and give examples from science about how mixing is integral, increasing diversity is integral to human survival, to thriving. So I think we are not nationalists per se at all. And Hinduism emboldens the view that we are not nationalists at all. I don't know, Narendra Modi ne galat bol diya.
No. This is, I wish we had started this debate earlier, or maybe we do it.
Peacetime. I'm talking of peacetime.
No. I'm talking even in peacetime. First, two things. I think the Prime Minister is such a superb player on words. I do not think so. His interview to a foreign journalist would be without his wanting to speak what he spoke. For a lot of people, for myself, or for a lot of other people, I would say they misspoke or misspeak. He is a consummate politician. He knows exactly what he speaks. Second, do you think in Indian context, nationalism was required because what you say, diversity, we were so fed this unity and diversity thing that I have felt it became almost a impregnation of the mind that we are diverse people, and our diversities were leading to disunities. Our diversities were leading to distinctions. Our diversities were leading to separatism from various parts of India. Some would say Tamil, Elam, some would say Kashmir is separate, because this unity and diversity is a concept which was fed throughout the Nehruan era. And we used to think of it as a great concept. But every nation needs a bedrock of what we are, which there is no debate on. You talk to an American, he would say, we are of Anglo-Saxon stock, which is not maybe demographically true anymore, or may not be true in 10 years. But that is why they say the most assimilation happens in US. Whereas you go to other countries, the assimilation doesn't happen. So do you not think we need a defining principle? If you had to use it in a political sense or a unifying sense, do you not think we need a unifying principle of what we are as a people?
Yeah, and I think that unifying principle does not have to be nationalism. I mean, for example, I don't, what defines me, for example, or what defines you? It's very easy to ask this question, but it's not very easy to say this. You know, the immediate answer is I'm an Indian. That defines me. But then what defines what India is? You know, people forget that India is 3 times, 4 times the population of Europe, and roughly, much more diversity than Europeans have for a start, in terms of course, the diversity in genetic population, in the diversity in culture and things of that sort. But there has always been this essence that of Indianness, now, which is what the left, of course, I mean, it's embarrassing to discuss that. They don't think of this concept of India existed before 1947, right? I mean, there have been so many debates, and all of them have been demolished, right? So this concept of India has been there, you can say, almost quasi-eternal. So it's wrong to say that India was formed only in 1947. With that bedrock, do we really need to define ourselves, is my question. I mean, it's isko kaise define karo? It's like love. I don't know. And you talked of America. I just wanted to tell you.
First, I want to ask you, you said love or lust?
Love.
Anand, while you're doing that, I would put the question in your mind so that you can answer this also. See, a nationalism and a nation state with defined rigid borders is, I think, in India's evolution, not talking about the Western concepts of nationalism or how it has been led to provision, for example, Mussolini, a nationalist, but we need to have a defined concept of nationalism, because let's say US, there is nobody seriously saying that California should segregate. In jokes, they say, oh, we are a different country from Texas, but there is no movement of that. India still faces various parts of India, a certain percentage of population saying that we need to separate. Kashmir, for one example, right? And we have had it since 80s in various other parts of the country, which we can't deny. So when there is diversity, which is somehow seeming apart, or people wanting to, we have held together, and I believe we will hold together. But we have seen a separation in 47. We have seen movements, armed movements in various parts of India. Do you not think in that sense, we need to be very rigid and defined on what we are as a nation?
So, okay, so that's an interesting question. So, here we were dealing with the philosophical concepts of what nationalism is, as opposed to what patriotism is, and how you bring in science and you can explain it, how exclusivity doesn't help, because most of the scientific discoveries that in modern day and age are not Indian, but we are taking advantage of that. If you were nationalistic or, kind of, you can say North Korea, exclusivist, egotistical, we might not be, there is no to and fro that kind. So, but you've asked this question. Now, this question, Ishkaran, is a question which has been asked for hundreds of years, right? This is not a new question. Even if you were to define yourself as nationalist, you are against a particular sect or a community that doesn't care whatever label you choose yourself to address at. They still would want separation. Why? Because there is something over and above what they consider as India, and that is religion. So what has been written there, they're not going to, be changed. They're not going to change your opinion, come what may. And when people say about two-nation theory, for example, they always blame Savarkar for it. And these idiots don't know that it was Sir Syed before that. But interestingly, even before that, it was Karl Marx who propounded this in his book, The Eastern Question in 1853. So about 30 years before Sir Syed talked of two-nation theory, and about 30 years before Savarkar talked of it and Jinnah talked of it. And Karl Marx said this, that this is what this religion gives you. And what Ambedkar also said. So there are two, it is intrinsic. You can't change it. You can label yourself as whatever. I can say, no, Ishkaran, you are not nationalist, you are patriot. You will say, no, I'm a nationalist. Kashmir mein hoga kuch farak nahi padega. Unko alag hi chahiye. They don't care about what your definition is because they are going on their track.
No, but Anand, you're right. There is a concept of, let's say, Ummah, right?
Yeah.
So that would militantly vitiate against a concept of a rigid nation, right? But why I say you cannot convince, and not even talking about Ummah people, you can't convince people who want separatism for whatever reason. But your own people should at least be clearly defined on what sides to choose. I see there is a lot of woolly-headedness in even the side which wants India to be united.
अच्छा, उसमें मुझे एक बहुत जरूरी बात कहनी है, इसमें मैं ये भी कहना चाहता हूं कि one of the most brilliant handles I've ever come across, and you would know this, is true Indology. There is no doubt about it. But many people, in fact, few people asked me that, yes, I follow him, he follows me. But I don't retweet his tweets very often. And someone said, so why don't you do it if you're a fan of him? Yes, I am a fan of him. Because every time I do this, he reminds me of what tragedy has struck this country over the last 6 years, that we haven't reformed our education system. उसका एक जब वो पर्दाफाश करता है, मुझे उन पे गुस्सा नहीं आता जिनका पर्दाफाश हुआ है, मुझे अब इस सरकार पे गुस्सा आता है और ये मिनिस्टर्स पे आता है जो कि कहते हैं we are proud that we haven't changed even a comma in our textbooks. So Ishkaran, what you're talking about is this change that comes only through generation, through reading. Now, left to me, what you're talking of, how do you change the perceptions of people? Now, how do you change a person? For example, Sitaram Yechuri, उसने पूरी दुनिया देख ली यार 40 साल में कि पूरा कम्युनिज्म हर जगह तहस नहस हो गया, डिस्ट्रॉय हो गया, यूएसएसआर चला गया, चाइना इज नॉट कम्युनिस्ट एनीमोर इन दैट सेंस, वेनेजुएला, लेकिन फिर भी वो कम्युनिस्ट है. So you can't change people like Sitaram Yechuri, but you can change people if they are veering towards wanting to become people like Sitaram Yechuri. You give them an option. I'm not saying कि बनना ही नहीं है, बनो यार, जो मन में करना आपके करो. But if you give them an option, if you give them this book called The Black Book of Communism, or so many other books that factually, academically destroy this whole facade of communism and talk of how this single cult has killed 100 million people around the world, and you still worship it, you still wear Che t-shirts and you put Che posters, even though you know the guy was a mass murderer, he executed, he had camps, he was against homosexuals, and so on and so forth. जब ये knowledge ही नहीं मिलेगी, तो लोग कैसे सोचेंगे कि भाई ये चीज गलत है, ये चीज सही है? तो इसीलिए मैं टू इंडोलॉजी की ट्वीट नहीं करता, because I don't want him to be on my timeline. It's not that I hate him, I like him, but it reminds me of this, what this sad government has not done in the last 6 years, and in fact is proud of not having changed anything.
Anand, but that would not go so easily, because what we are saying in US, right? Most prosperous nation, probably the only superpower. China might have some claim, but it's probably the only superpower still. And looting, and I saw this video, I don't have it with me, where somebody is doing a thumbs up from the glass window to a protester in the street. The protester throws stones and he says, "Hum aapki side pe, hum tumhari side." So they still don't learn. And as Dr. Swamy tells a joke of Namundri Path, when communism was at its peak.
Yes.
So he said, Namundri Path, you should meet me. Every year he would say, USSR, no poverty, no illness, no lack of medicine, no lack of education. Every year the same thing, same thing. He said, I met him in 90 and I said, finally no USSR also. The drug they sell. Yeah. It sounds so well, that's framed so well, and I fully agree with your point on education reform, but I will not go into it today because
I think we've way overshot the time. It's been such a wonderful discussion.
It was absolutely wonderful, Anand. Thank you so much for your time. And hopefully in a few months we do this once more. By that time education has changed and we are discussing what's the change in the education rather than
Thanks very much, Ishkaran. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can leave the meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope all of you enjoyed the session and liked the session. It's brilliant views of Anand Ranganathan. Please do share it. And anybody watching for the first time, do subscribe to the channel, because we will keep on bringing guests who would come and give their experience to you, who would talk about heavy issues, serious issues, issues which need in-depth discussions, because everything cannot be covered in 2 minutes. So we need to cover it for 90 minutes, 2 hours. We will do all of that. So anybody watching this, please subscribe to it. If you like the views, please like the video and do share the video with all your friends so that they also, who are not on Twitter or on Facebook, hear the views. So share it on WhatsApp, emails, any platform you know. Please share it. Thank you.